Hello and welcome to Pause for Payments. I am Kristy Duncan and I am delighted to have with me today Ivy Liu, who's Vice President of Product at Nanopay based in Toronto. Welcome, Ivy.
Thank you for having me.
So delighted to have you here. Today we're going to talk about career paths and how women can navigate careers successfully from big global banking organizations to much smaller fintechs. And Ivy's a perfect person for this discussion. So let's get started. Ivy, you're now at Nanopay, which is this fantastic fintech startup that's still growing at a tremendous rate. Can you tell the audience who might be not from Canada a little bit about Nanopay and your role here?
Absolutely. So we are a fintech headquartered in Toronto, Canada. We offer domestic and cross-border payments to businesses and small banks. We also offer cash and liquidity solutions as well. And we work directly with both banks and also businesses.
Fantastic. So that must be really exciting. And Nanopay clearly is growing and you're adding people and building out your business lines. Can you talk a little bit about your earlier career? You started, or you've got this fantastic experience at a large global bank. Tell us, how does that journey go from big bank to a fintech startup?
Sure. So it might be a bit long. It's a 20-year journey in payments, but I think it's definitely an interesting one. I started off actually in the merchant acquiring space, in the contact center as tech support for point of sale back when I was in university. And I was in that company for, I think, 11 years of my career, various roles, including change management, planning and implementation, project management in tech and in product for merchant card processing. And I remember very, clearly at one point feeling I hit the ceiling when I was into the tech function there because all the senior leaders at the next level were primarily men. And it became clear to me at that point that I kind of reached the peak of my ladder. And this was actually the reason I ended up changing jobs and going to Citi. Mm-hmm. So funny enough, shortly after I left, timing's always key here, a woman CEO ended up running the company and things started to change shortly after.
Timing is everything.
Yeah, but Citi was a really great experience. So it kind of brought me into the banking industry for 7 years in treasury and trade, cash management, implementation, dealing with corporates, large Fortune 500 companies, specializing in liquidity implementation. So it really rounded out kind of my profile. But I will say that I purposely, chose Citi because they had always been known to promote a very diverse culture and they had a large amount of women networks globally, which is why I decided to take the step and leap over to Citibank. And I can, and I can say for being there for 7 years, I can kind of validate that they do a very good job with trying to be diverse in their hiring. I've seen them drive initiatives for pay equality, where they used to do analysis between pay comparisons from different departments, just to make sure that there's equality between men and women. And I've actually seen them take actions to close that gap. So I think they did also a really great job pushing for women in leadership positions. One story that comes to mind. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit here now, but
good. That's good.
One of the stories I remember very clearly at Citi was my time there when I was pregnant. I remember going on mat leave while I was at Citi, kind of fearing that it's going to slow down my career. I hope that other women don't feel that, but I'm sure that they do. But this ended up being a success story for me because after I came back from mat leave, I ended up getting promoted. And so I'm not saying that there's 100% gender equality, but I think that they've definitely been on the right path and they're clearly been pushing in the right direction.
That's fantastic. It's such a great story to hear. And I want to interrupt for just a quick moment because you're right. I have seen posts from Citi around the world that they do focus on this gender pay gap, and it's so important. And that leadership is absolutely vital because, if it doesn't start here at home, then how's it going to get out to the rest of the industry? So it's nice to see their leadership there. Sorry, exactly. Continue.
No, that's I definitely I give them I commend them a lot for all the initiatives, networks that they've had and all the efforts they put in to try to really, bridge the gap. So I think that finally brings me to my journey here at Nanopay. So mentioned to everyone here, it's from a big old global bank to a small fintech in Toronto. But I came to Nanopay here and soon realized that with our tech, we can build a solution that kind of solve the pain points that I was seeing with my clients at Citibank. So I focused on that for about 2 years, and I'm currently here as the VP of Product at Nanopay. As a minority woman in payments tech company sitting on the leadership team, I consider that definitely an achievement on my end.
Fantastic. And hopefully you've been able to bring some of those best practices around diversity and gender pay gap to Nanopay as well.
Absolutely. Actually, I think Nanopay's done the fact that I'm sitting on the leadership team, I think it speaks volumes in terms of, their vision of making sure that the leadership team at least is diverse. So.
Awesome. That's so great that you're able to take that leadership. So Ivy, you've navigated your amazing career through both large and small organizations. Can you talk a little bit about what makes it difficult for women in our industry, and particularly in payment tech companies? What hurdles do you encounter that others might not?
I think there's definitely a lack of women in the tech industry, and it hurts, right? It hurts the industry. Diverse companies have a competitive edge. They're statistically known to perform better. And stats show that 26% of competing jobs are held by women. And that's a turnover rate that's twice as high as well for women than it is for men. And that's concerning, and it's not motivating for other women to get into the tech field, right? And I think there's a number of reasons why this is low. So the first one is clear gender wage gap. Women just aren't paid the same as their male colleagues, right? Studies show that male colleagues are offered higher salaries than female counterparts for the same role in the same company 59% of the time. There's also fewer women in senior roles. So if you look across the board at senior roles in tech companies, they're often filled with men. Like, what's disappointing for me, I guess, is that big tech companies like Google, I think last year's stat was 33% female workforce, Facebook at 23%. I mean, these numbers, they're quite substantial and different. So this needs to change. And I think the numbers need to move slowly more to a 50-50 ratio. There's also an interesting article that I read the other day around the psychology of men and women. They kind of just thought was interesting to share. But they say that, if a man thinks that they match half of the job description, they usually apply for the job. And if a woman doesn't match 90% of the job application, they actually won't apply, which I find is actually very interesting and very quite true for me, at least.
Indeed. Well, and that research has been around for a while, and it is disturbing. And I know when I was working at a big bank in Canada, I remember seeing those posts for jobs, and I looked at it and there were 10 boxes and I could only tick 9 or maybe 8. And I thought, okay, well, I better wait until the next time it comes up, 2 years from now, and then I can apply. And throughout your career, if you're waiting an extra 2 years in every role, then at the end of your career, the men are here and the women are here. And the men would have the approach that, well, I maybe can't tick that box, but I can learn it on the job. And so I think we as women need to approach our careers and manage them more proactively, and put our hands up for more of those opportunities, which we know that our male colleagues are doing. And I think we also need to really look at how we changing our hiring practices. We need to be going to those women and tapping them on the shoulder and saying, I think you should apply for this. I'd really like to see you apply for this. I think you could do this, and really encourage them and give them confidence to do that.
And funny you say that, because that's actually what happened to me when I was at Citi. So I know you asked the question, I think I kind of skimmed over answering it, but when you mentioned kind of how did it end up basically at a small fintech coming from a large global established institution like Citi, the Nanopay actually found me. So I was headhunted. If I had looked at the posting, I would have thought, hey, I don't, there's 2 boxes that I don't quite think I check off, maybe I shouldn't apply. It was because I was headhunted instead that this ended up moving forward. And I wasn't looking at the time, but of course I'm very happy and glad that Nanopay found me. But that just kind of shows you, right? Like that the headhunting, the poking on the shoulder, hey, I think you'd be good for the job, really does help. And just talking about, we mentioned the differences between established organization and the fintech. I think there's a couple of things I do want to kind of talk about that I think is interesting to share. So the complete different opposite environments, right? You have a large global financial institution, a small startup, and it very much comes down to, and now being on the other side of things, it very much comes down to like a preference and personality, I think, in terms of what you're looking for. So with Citi, you have your, established processes, the brand recognition, which never thought of when you at the time when you're there, but it really does help. But driving change in an organization as massive as Citi is the hard part, right? It's what's difficult because you need regional buy-in, and you need multiple levels of approval. And then when you're working with multinationals, it's also where are they headquartered, right? Because that's really where all the decision making happens. And with Citi, that's New York. I'm obviously located in Canada, so you can kind of imagine the frustrations of driving any change based on the region that I'm in. But the payments and banking industry at the time, I remember thinking about this at large. It's going through massive changes with innovation. I knew even at Citi, there's small players coming in the market that's going to deliver faster, customized, cheaper, frictionless payments. The way we move money in the economy is completely changing, very different from how the banks move money right now. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day if you're a big bank, small player, you need to move fast, you need to adapt, and you need to be innovative. And I knew at the time that I wanted to be a part of that change. I was just afraid to take the leap, like to your point, like looking at the postings. Oh, I don't know if I can necessarily do that. But I just knew that there was so much opportunity and timing was ripe. And that the tap on the shoulder made me take the leap, and really glad that I did. But back to that brand recognition, it is difficult because you don't have the brand recognition. You really have to work hard to earn those sales of the company, right? As a whole. And it doesn't matter what department you're in, everyone's rolling up your sleeves to get the job done. I played wore multiple hats. I was doing some of the business development, I was doing product stuff. And even some of the operational aspects and helping them because I had, history back in my early days of doing these things. And so you're really just rolling up your sleeves, getting what you need to get done. But the good thing is you're not afraid to step on people's toes. At a big bank, you're kind of, this is what you're doing. You have your small piece, you do your small piece and you kind of pass it over. Here, it doesn't matter. It's from beginning to end. The job needs to get done. If there's a gap, you need to do it. So just back to that personality or preference. I like the ability to make decisions quickly, efficiently, pivot easily when I think there's a better way. In a small company, it's easier to do that. And I think, sorry?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'm a part of the innovation and modernization process here than I was at a larger institution. So from ideation to build to launch, you can see the process all the way through, especially from a product perspective. And I think this is the kind of environment that I've really learned the most because you're exposed to basically all facets of it from beginning to end. So I think overall, to me, the leap made sense for me. And I feel very fortunate and to say that I have no regrets.
Fantastic. How long have you been at Nanopay now?
3 years. It's been 3 years.
Okay.
It feels like 30, but it's been 3 years.
But I love the comparison. I mean, the way you've contrasted the big organization, which has all the established processes and the brand recognition and the well-established client base, which is all fantastic. But from the startup perspective, you're able to be much more nimble and innovative and much more collaborative across the team. Everybody rolls up their sleeves, everybody pitches in, and it's a much more team effort. Whereas with a larger organization, you have just your small slice of the whole overall big picture. So yeah, very, very different approaches, and different people are comfortable in different environments. It's great to see that you found an environment that is invigorating and motivating for you. Yeah, it's fantastic. I want to move on now and talk about women in financial services. And we've touched on this a little bit already, but particularly in technology. And I know this, I got an engineering degree and I worked at a big bank, and especially in the tech field, there's such a paucity of women. And some organizations are doing some fantastic work around the world. MasterCard's got their Girls for Tech program, and PwC has some work and happening in the UK and beyond. And I know this is really, really important because as companies, we're offering products and services to the whole population, not just to the male population. But in order for us as organizations building product to really understand that customer journey, we have to be able to see it from the customer's eyes. And there's no way that a man can see customer journey in the same way that a woman can. So I am really, really vested in this. And I think it's really important. But do you have thoughts, Ivy, on how we can get more women into these fields of technology and even financial services, especially in the payments side?
Yeah, I think definitely a couple come to mind. Just going back to what we were saying earlier, the pay gaps, right? Don't underpay the woman in your company. So some roles, if it's the same role, similar backgrounds, they should be paid the same, and it doesn't matter if they're male or female. So it's kind of good to take a look at your own company and see if that's present. Reducing gender biases. So a simple thing that you can do as part of the hiring process, we're not doing this right now, but it's definitely a suggestion I'm taking back to our leadership team, is removing the names from the resumes, right? Because first names, last names often give away the gender, and even the background actually and it really shouldn't matter, right? So we should be looking at person's skill sets, their experience, and their credentials.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I took National Ballet School off my resume. Much as I loved having it there, but it was a dead giveaway.
It was. And surprisingly, the gender bias training, I definitely had that, but Nanopay also, a small little, fintech company, we also have gender bias training, which I think is great. So putting hiring managers, especially through unconscious bias training, I think is such an important piece that should be built into the programs of companies. And again, I commend Nanopay for doing that as a small startup. But each employee that's part of the hiring process really, it could be a manager, it could be part of a panel interview, but anyone essentially that goes in front and interviews another individual here at Nanopay, at least they go through unconscious bias training. So this is something that we can easily roll out, in other companies and programs.
That's great. Well, yeah, these are all great ideas, and it would be really nice to see them adopted across the industry for sure. The gender pay gap is something a lot of women in particular suffer from, and it's not even always apparent to them. They don't even necessarily know it. And I don't know what's better, to know it and suffer with it, or to be in blissful ignorance about it. But either way, it's not right, and it can cost women over the course of their career. It can cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And I think one of the ones that, at least for me, very passionately feel that strongly about is creating maternity programs, right? So I mentioned in my experience, or maybe personally before earlier, I went on mat leave, and I was feeling like I had to sacrifice my career, right? Either have the family or have my career, but you can't have both. And as modern day women now, we're often feel pressure to do both and do both well. So it's draining, and it can be harmful psychologically to feel these pressures like on a daily basis. So from a company perspective, I think making sure that and I'm fortunate, I think every company so far that I've come across has the equal leave maternity program. So men can also take paternity leave, and women as well, basically it could be equal. So women don't have to feel like the pressure is for them to take off all that time.
Yeah.
And Netflix actually comes to mind, because I've heard they even built lactation rooms in their offices. So I'm like, kudos for you for doing that. That's definitely another step forward.
For sure. And I think the industry best practice is not to have maternity or paternity leave, but parental leave, and make it available and encouraged to both. And I think in one of the Nordic countries, I think Norway, maybe Denmark, they actually enforce that the fathers take a good chunk of that. I don't know if it's 50-50, but so I think that's important, not only that the women get, opportunities to have their partners bond with the kids, but it's also really important for the fathers
Right.
to understand what it's like to be on parental leave. And, you've stepped back from the workforce and what's it like to come back after a few months of absence? Does it actually put your career on hold while you're gone, or do you still have some opportunities when you come back? So it's a good thing. Fantastic.
I think even,
So
oh, sorry.
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say, even here of the women's network that you have, Kristy, I mean, just the raising the awareness and the education, and kind of motivating women by speaking to other women, about payments and the technology. This is huge, right? The education and the awareness aspect is definitely extremely important. So I
Yeah,
commend
well,
you doing that.
thank you. Well, I like to make sure that we have a forum to have that dialogue, so that women can do that in a safe place, to have that conversation, and that they're comfortable doing so, and that they can see that they're not the only one. It's not just me having these challenges, and, exchange ideas and best practices with others in the industry in a very contextual way that, is appropriate and relevant. So that's all good. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about payments, because we're both payments geeks. And I know that, I mean, it's common knowledge that digital payments have really shot up in the last year due to this global pandemic. And I think, um, especially on the contactless side and the retail side, because people have had this aversion to managing cash or touching cash, and many countries are actually encouraging digital payments. Or if we want to have that complete digital experience, it obviously ends up with a digital payment at the end. Can you share your insights, Ivy, around what other innovations we might expect to see in the consumer payment space?
Well, we've definitely seen I agree with you. We've seen a significant rise in digital payments since the pandemic, specifically contactless payments, like you mentioned. Overall usage has risen, I think, like 150%, on average in North America. No one wants to be touching physical cash or coins that can just easily spread bacteria and germs, right? And I know for a fact that the Canada's raised their contactless limit since the pandemic from $100 originally. So that's not needing to swipe the card, not needing PIN and signature, just to tap it on the contactless reader to $250, which is huge, right? There's a permanent
Fantastic.
increase in the firmware of the devices. So next innovations in line, I think. Not so much consumer specific, but I think COVID does accelerate the arrival of digital currencies. So central bank digital currencies, that's a whole digital fiat version of fiat money issued by the central bank. Open banking, use of APIs, it's going to drive new innovations to market that will promote competition. And it's going to significantly disrupt the banking industry, which has dominated at least the North American industry at large. And smaller players like fintechs, like us, are going to be able to offer a higher degree of customization, payment speed, lowering costs, reduce friction in payments. And I think it's going to be really interesting to fast forward in time to see how much the banking industry, after the implementation though and adoption of open banking, will be years out. And the other,
yeah, we're already starting to see that in the UK, where they've had open banking, mandated for the last couple of years, and it's now in market. It's operating in the wild, and granted, there's a few little hiccups that they're ironing out, but there are, the innovation is fantastic, and now they're moving beyond open banking to open finance and open data, which is the way that Australia is approaching it with the open data concept. And I think in the end, the consumers will benefit tremendously with all, as you say, more competition, more innovation from companies like Nanopay. And overall, it's going to be a really fantastic thing. I'm really excited to see what our market looks like a few years from now.
Me as well. And just the last one I think I would bring up is blockchain, because it's always something that is close to my mind. And most people think of Bitcoin when they think of blockchain, but I think there's much more to blockchain than just Bitcoin. Nanopay operates on a centralized blockchain ledger. I won't get into too much of that, but to me, when I think of blockchain, it enables you to, not just Bitcoin, but it enables you to digitally track ownership of assets, right? And that could, and also could increase transaction speed, reduce costs, and more importantly, it also has the power to provide that immutable tamper-proof ledger, so that it essentially becomes your record of truth, which to me should be music to everyone's ears in the financial industry, right? From a compliance perspective, because you have everything is this clear trail and record of everything, and it can't be changed or altered.
Yeah. Well, I love your insights, Ivy. Just the way that you've painted the whole central bank digital currency. I mean, digital currency, which ties into the distributed ledger and that technology, using that as a foundation, but then also looking to other amazing applications for that digital ledger technology. And it's interesting to hear that Nanopay is using that as part of your technology stack. And competition, will absolutely increase with open banking, and it's exciting to see what it's going to do to the Canadian market. This has been a great discussion, Ivy. I'd like to close with one question that I ask all of our guests on Pause for Payments, and that is, you've had this amazing career and you've gone from, the merchant side to the global bank. Now you're working in this amazing startup fintech at Nanopay. What career advice would you share with the rising stars in our audience? Are there a couple of career pearls of wisdom that you like to share with us?
Well, I think the biggest advice I can give is don't let anyone bound you to rules and what you can and can't do. What I mean by that is, give you a good example. In culturally, and also like my parents come from a different time, right? They would in their minds think that, oh, the industry that you should be in is X. As a woman, you should be going into this industry, stay in banking. Fintech, to them, it doesn't really quite jive in, and they don't quite understand what that really means. There's also, when you talk about numbers and stats and seeing how low it is, don't let those boundaries that are in place today give you fear of what you could achieve potentially. Just look beyond that. Focus on yourself. So kind of mute up the noise of other stats, of the boundaries that are in place today in terms of where we've set from a gender pay gap, how many people are in tech today, are women supposed to be in this kind of industry? Are you supposed to be competing? Usually it's men. Like, I think a lot of that is noise. So my advice is kind of clear up the noise, focus on yourself. Train yourself to be to have unconscious bias training, right? And just really keep forward and power through.
I love that. It's so great. Play by your own rules and don't be constrained by boundaries that others put on you. And it's so true. And I look back even on my career and think, it wasn't until I actually could clear out the noise and I actually focused on my career, not what was best for my family overall, but what was best for Kristy and my career. That's when my career started to really grow and take off. So clearly you've learned that lesson earlier in your career and it's done you well. So thank you for sharing that, Ivy.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So this has been an absolutely delightful conversation. I love your perspectives, Ivy, and it's so refreshing to see you coming from this, watching your career journey as it goes from big, huge global organization to a small fintech, and how you've been able to really, push the innovation agenda, but also push on the gender agenda and break through that glass ceiling and get into the leadership team at Nanopay and show other women how it's done. And your leadership on, addressing things like gender pay gap and gender bias in the workplace has been really fantastic. So thank you for doing everything that you do. I'm really excited to see what's coming up next with Nanopay, but also some of the other things that you talked about in terms of innovation in our industry with open banking and central bank digital currencies and digital ledgers. It's been a great discussion. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for all you do, Kristy.
No, it's wonderful. So thank you to everybody for listening today. And I encourage you all to join us online for the many positive payments discussions that we have with awesome, amazing women leaders from around the world of payments like Ivy, and look forward to our next discussion.